This moment is chilling because it's not just about judges. It's about whether the truth itself is becoming negotiable in America's courts.
Just to finish Senator Blumenthal's point, I hope you realize how ridiculous the four of you look. Spouting these preposterous, canned answers in a forum in which A, you're supposed to tell the truth, and B, you're supposed to demonstrate the judicial capacity to make independent, factual decisions in hard cases. If you can't even sit here and say that Joe Biden won that election or that the Capitol was attacked, what's left? What's left if a hard case comes your way as a judge, and let's say the Trump administration is bearing down on that? Why would we ever believe that you would give the litigants a fair hearing and a fair decision if the executive branch was leaning in on you when we can't get a reasonable answer out of any of you with the executive branch leaning in on you to give these ridiculous answers today? I'm really sorry to have to go through this and that you have to go through this, but it would be nice if you could tell your executive branch handlers, for instance, Ms. Clark, I'm supported by Lindsey Graham. He's a friend of President Trump. He's the second senior person on the Republican side in the Judiciary Committee. He's likely to be the next Judiciary Committee chair. I think I'll be okay. I don't need to make myself ridiculous at your direction. It'd be great if you could have said that. It'll be great if your answers were simple and honest here today. It's really disappointing. Let me ask a different question, a legal question. A judge, you want to be judges. A judge gets a threat to the judge's life or to the judge's family. Can you imagine a scenario in which liability may attach to individuals beyond the utterer of that threat? Ms. Clark?
Senator, as a prosecutor, there are instances where there's some responsibility that is assigned to someone who is not the utterer of a threat to an individual. And so to answer your question, yes, I can imagine.
Do you agree?
Yes, Senator, and if confirmed to the bench, I would follow all Supreme Court precedent and Ninth Circuit precedent.
Mr. Rick, you agree?
Yes, Senator, I would agree with that.
I don't know that I care what you think, Ms. Westerkamp, because you're going to international trade and you're probably not going to see much of this, but do you agree?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, and those doctrines that would provide the legal basis for investigation in those scenarios would include doctrines like, name one, Ms. Clark.
Senator, doctrines that are, if someone is essentially carrying out
solicitation, would that be one? Solicitation of a threat?
Yes.
Or a conspiracy out of which the threat emerged, would that be another one?
Yes.
Yes. How about, and it's the product of an enterprise under the racketeering statutes. Would that also be another way that liability could extend beyond the utterer?
That is correct, Senator.
Can you think of any others, Ms. Lane, where liability extends beyond the utterer of the threat? What are some of the legal theories that would support that kind of investigation and prosecution?
Senator, the doctrines you mentioned, I would agree with, and I would just look always to the federal law and federal statutes guiding that.
Mr. Recchi?
Senator, I would agree with that. I think you covered the major ones, conspiracy, RICO. There may be other avenues of potential legal liability, but I think you covered the three big ones in that scenario.
Ms. Westerkamp, you agree?
Senator, I'm not aware if there are any more. With my practice before the Court of International Trade and Court of Federal Claims, it doesn't touch on criminal law.
So here's why I asked you these questions. I asked you these questions because right now federal judges are under the worst shadow of physical threat in my lifetime and perhaps in the history of this country. And in responding to those threats, we have the United States Marshals Service, which reports to the Department of Justice. And I have now over a dozen times asked the Marshals Service, will you investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence justifies it? That's a super easy question. The answer is, yeah, of course we will. They won't answer that. They won't answer that. And I point this out because judges across the country need to pay attention to the fact that the Marshals Service won't confirm that it will investigate behind the utter of a threat if the evidence supports that. And why would that be the case? That would be the case because when you get behind the utterer of a lot of these threats, you run into right-wing conspiracies. And this MAGA Department of Justice would rather not go there. And so they leave judges exposed with investigations in which they aren't doing investigative 101 work that you've all identified as plausible legal theories. And we need to fix that. We need to fix that.
What you just watched cuts straight into one of the most dangerous trends in modern politics, the erosion of truth inside institutions that are supposed to depend on it the most. This wasn't just a heated exchange, it was a test of whether judicial nominees, people who could hold power over life-changing decisions, are willing to state basic, verifiable facts. And when that test fails, even in subtle ways, it raises a much bigger question. If someone won't stand firm on simple truth under pressure, what happens when the stakes are even higher? Because think about what's being asked here. Not a complicated legal theory, not an obscure precedent, a basic reality about an election and an attack that the entire country witnessed. When those questions don't get clear answers, it signals something deeper than caution. It signals pressure. And that's exactly what Democrats are trying to expose. Not just what these nominees believe, but what they're willing to say when political power is watching. Because the judiciary is supposed to be the one branch of government that stands apart from that pressure. Judges are not supposed to bend. They're not supposed to calculate their answers based on who appointed them or who might be watching. So when you see hesitation on something so fundamental, it creates doubt, not just about these individuals, but about the system they're entering. And then the conversation shifts, but it doesn't actually change topics. It deepens the same concern. Now we're talking about threats against judges, real threats, increasing threats. And this is where it becomes even more serious, because this isn't theoretical anymore. This is about the safety of people who are responsible for upholding the law. The line of questioning walks through something very important. Can responsibility for a threat extend beyond the person who actually says it? And the answer, from a legal standpoint, is clearly yes. Through conspiracy, solicitation, racketeering, there are established legal pathways to hold broader networks accountable. That's not controversial. That's basic legal doctrine. But here's where the alarm is being raised. If those tools exist, and everyone in that room acknowledges they do, why aren't they being consistently applied? Why is there hesitation to go beyond the surface level to investigate not just who made a threat, but who may have encouraged it, amplified it, or organized it? That's the heart of the concern. Because if threats against judges are increasing, and the response is limited to the most visible actor, then the system is only addressing symptoms, not causes. And when causes aren't addressed, the problem grows. Democrats are pushing this point because the independence of the judiciary doesn't just depend on legal protections, it depends on physical safety. If judges begin to feel that threats against them won't be fully investigated, that those behind the scenes won't be held accountable, it creates a chilling effect. It impacts how they do their jobs, how they make decisions, and ultimately how justice is delivered. And then comes the most serious implication of all, the suggestion that political considerations might be influencing how far investigations go. If that's true, even in part, it strikes at the core of the rule of law, because justice cannot be selective. It cannot depend on which direction a case leads or who might be implicated. The entire system depends on the idea that the law applies equally no matter where the evidence points. That's why this moment matters so much. It's not about one nominee or one hearing. It's about whether the guardrails that protect truth, accountability, and judicial independence are still holding. Because once those guardrails weaken, everything else becomes more fragile. So when you watch this, don't just see confrontation. See what's being tested. See what's being revealed, and understand why Democrats continue to press these issues. Because protecting the integrity of the courts is not optional. It's essential to the survival of democracy itself. If you want more breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the surface and help you truly understand what's at stake, subscribe to Blue Voice. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to see the bigger picture. Because the strength of a democracy depends on people who are paying attention.